My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 30 years old. And 6 hours ago, I ended a 2.5 year relationship in the middle of Easter dinner without raising my voice once. Not because I wasn't shocked, not because I didn't care, but because by the time the moment actually happened, something in me had already learned how to go still. I work as a civil engineer for the County Public Works Department. Drainage systems, flood mitigation, infrastructure reviews. It's not glamorous. Nobody's filming documentaries about stormwater flow rates or retention basin calculations. But it's stable. It's predictable. It's mine. 5 years in, I'm vested. I make $78,000 a year with a clear promotion track ahead of me. I own a condo. My car's paid off. On Saturdays, I coach my nephew's little league team and pretend I understand why 10-year-olds argue about base rules like it's a Supreme Court case. My life isn't flashy, but it's rooted, and that matters. It matters more than I realized until someone tried to pull it out from under me without asking. Daniel, my now ex-boyfriend, works in fashion marketing. He's good at it too. Creative, sharp, the kind of man who walks into a room already scanning for the next opportunity, the next connection, the next door to open. When we first met, I admired that about him. He once told me, over coffee in a place that charged too much for oat milk, that his career wasn't meant to be a landing pad. It's a launch pad, he said, smiling like he'd just said something profound. At the time, I thought it was. Now I realize it wasn't just his career. It was everything, including me. We'd been together for 2.5 years. We didn't live together. I had my condo. He had his studio apartment filled with framed prints of Paris streets and soft yellow lights strung across the ceiling like he was permanently staging a photo shoot. We talked about moving in eventually, but there was always a reason to wait. Timing, career moves. Let's not rush something good. I understand now. We weren't waiting for the right time. We were waiting for his next move, and I was expected to follow. Paris wasn't new. Daniel had been talking about Paris since the second month we started dating. He took French in college. His kitchen had a French press he used exactly twice a month, but displayed like it was part of his personality. He played soft cafe music on Sunday mornings like we lived above a bakery instead of a parking lot. To him, Paris wasn't a dream. It was inevitable, like gravity. I treated it like people treat distant ambitions. The way you nod when someone says they're going to write a novel someday. Supportive, but not literal. Not something that was going to show up in your life unannounced. Easter Sunday. My mom hosts every year. Big dinner. Too much food. Too many chairs pulled around one table. My parents, my older sister and her husband, my younger brother and his wife, my grandmother, my nephew. About a dozen of us packed together in that warm, noisy, familiar way that makes you feel like nothing outside that house can really touch you. Daniel had been coming to these dinners for 2 years. My mom adored him. Everyone did. Dinner was going well. Ham, scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole. We were between the main course and dessert when my grandmother started telling one of her stories, the same one she's told at least 50 times, and we all laughed anyway, because that's what you do when someone's earned the right to repeat themselves. And then Daniel stood up. Actually stood up, pushed his chair back, wine glass in hand. My sister glanced at me like, is he about to make a toast? I had no idea. None. He smiled, wide and bright, and said, I have some exciting news I want to share with everyone. The room shifted. My mom leaned forward. My grandmother paused mid-sentence. My nephew stopped tapping his fork against his plate. And then he said it. We're moving to Paris. There are moments when time doesn't slow down. It just disconnects. Like your body is still sitting there, fork in hand, while your mind takes a step back and says, wait, that didn't just happen. But it had. He kept going. I applied for a position at a fashion house there, and I just got called back for the final interview. If everything goes well, we'll be relocating this summer. He was glowing, beaming, looking at me like I was supposed to jump up, wrap my arms around him, and turn this into a celebration. Like this was good news. Like this was ours. I had never heard about the application. Not once. Not a hint, not a conversation, not even a casual mention. The first time I learned that I was apparently moving to another continent was at my mother's Easter dinner table, with my grandmother sitting 2 feet away, with 12 people watching my face, waiting. I could feel it. Every pair of eyes in the room shifting toward me, waiting for my reaction, my approval, my participation in a plan I had never agreed to. And in that moment, something inside me settled. Not exploded, not panicked. Settled. I set my fork down. Took a breath, looked at him, and said, Bon voyage. He laughed, short, confused. What do you mean? I held his gaze. I mean, bon voyage. Good luck. That sounds like an amazing opportunity for you. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ice shifting in my grandmother's glass. For you, I repeated softly. You said you applied. You got the interview. You made this plan. I paused. I didn't. His smile didn't disappear, but it changed. It stopped reaching his eyes. He sat down slowly. My mom, bless her, clapped her hands lightly and said, "Who wants pie?" And just like that, the moment snapped. Conversation restarted. Plates moved. Voices filled the space again. But underneath it, everything had shifted. He didn't speak to me for the rest of dinner. I helped my mom wash dishes afterward, my hands moving automatically, while my mind replayed that moment over and over again. My sister pulled me aside quietly. Did you know about that? No. She nodded once. That's what I thought. The car ride home was silent for 12 minutes. I counted, because I could feel something building. And then, you humiliated me. I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't announce a life-changing decision in front of your entire family without telling you first. I wanted it to be a surprise. I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Surprises are birthday parties, Daniel, or puppies, not international relocations. You didn't even let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I finally glanced at him. You applied for a job in another country without talking to me. Then you announced it publicly to pressure me into going along with it. His jaw tightened. That's not pressure, that's excitement. No, I said quietly. That's manipulation. The word hung there. Heavy. Unavoidable. I'm trying to build us a life, he shot back. You're trying to build your life, I said, and slot me into it wherever I fit. Silence. Thicker this time. Final. I pulled up to his apartment. He opened the door, then paused. For a second, I thought he might say something else. Something real. Something honest. But instead, he just slammed the door, and I drove home alone. 6 hours later, my hands still weren't shaking. And I think that's when I realized this didn't start tonight. Tonight was just the first time it was loud enough that I couldn't pretend anymore. The Monday after Easter, Daniel called me at 8:14 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was already at my desk, coffee cooling beside a stack of drainage reviews, trying very hard to act like my personal life had not detonated between ham and pie less than 24 hours earlier. His voice was calmer than I expected. Too calm. The kind of calm people use when they've rewritten the story in their own head and would now like you to read from their version. He said he understood that the timing of the announcement had not been ideal. Not ideal. As if he'd shown up 30 minutes late to dinner instead of publicly volunteering my future. Then he told me the final interview was in 9 days. If he got the offer, the start date would be August 1st. He said this was the kind of opportunity that does not come twice, and he needed me to take it seriously. What he really meant was, I need you to stop reacting like a person and start cooperating like a plan. Then he asked very plainly, are you in or out? I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen without seeing any of it, and I said, I'm out. There was a pause on the line, not a shocked pause. Not hurt exactly. More like the pause of someone realizing the script had gone off page. Lauren, he said, softer now, don't do that. Do what? Reduce this to one bad moment. I leaned back in my chair and looked out my office window at the county parking lot, at 3 pickup trucks, and 1 maintenance van sitting in perfect rows under a washed-out sky. One bad moment? I repeated. Daniel, you applied for a job in another country without discussing it with me. Then you announced we were moving in front of my entire family. Then you got in my car and acted like I was the problem because I didn't smile on cue. His exhale came sharp through the phone. I knew if I brought it up earlier, you'd shut it down before you even considered it. That landed harder than the announcement had. Not because it surprised me, because it confirmed exactly what I already knew. He hadn't told me because he wasn't trying to include me. He was trying to bypass me. So you knew I might say no, I said quietly. I knew you'd be scared. There it was. That slight shift, that tiny, polished insult dressed up as insight. Not disagreement. Fear. Not a different life vision. Smallness. I felt something cold move through me, clean and clarifying. I'm not scared of Paris, I said. I'm saying no to being handled. He went silent. Then he said, with that brittle little laugh he used when he thought I was being dramatic, so you're choosing drainage ditches over our future? I should probably admit that line would have crushed me a year earlier, maybe even 6 months earlier. But by then, all I heard was the arrogance inside it, as if my life only counted if it looked cinematic enough for him, as if the work I had built, the family I showed up for, the home I paid for, the life I actually lived, were somehow embarrassing compared to his fantasy of us walking under Paris street lamps in good coats. I'm choosing my career, I said, my family, my home, and my self-respect over being a supporting character in your movie. He hung up on me, not dramatically, Just a hard click, like I had failed an audition. Tuesday, he got strategic, which honestly should have been predictable. Daniel had always believed that if one angle failed, the answer was not to reconsider. It was to repackage. At 3:40 that afternoon, my mom called. The second I heard her say, "Honey," in that careful voice, I knew. "He called you?" I asked. "No," she said. "He called me Mrs. Mitchell first, like I'm the dean of a school he's appealing a suspension to." I laughed before I could stop myself. It was the first real laugh I'd had since Easter. My mother continued. "Then he told me you were throwing away the chance of a lifetime, and that he hoped I would help you see the bigger picture." I closed my office door. "What did you say?" "I said I love him, sweetheart, but if my daughter says no, it's no. I'm not customer service for your relationship." That one got me harder. I sat down and laughed into my hand like a person who had been holding her breath for 2 days and had suddenly been reminded there was still oxygen in the room. My mother, once she was sure I was done laughing, lowered her voice and said, "Lauren, I need you to hear me. Whatever this is, it's not normal. People who want to build a life together do not make announcements first and have conversations later." I swallowed. I know. "No," she said, gentler now. "I think you do now. I'm glad you do." We hung up after that. Short conversation, no speeches. That's my family. Support rarely arrives wrapped in poetry. It arrives as pie, bread, and one devastatingly accurate sentence. Wednesday night, Daniel sent the PDF. 12 pages. I am not exaggerating. 12. A full presentation. A pitch deck, basically, for the Paris move. Page 1 was a title slide with a photo of the Eiffel Tower at dusk, an elegant serif text that read, "Our next chapter." I stared at that for a full 10 seconds. Not because it moved me, because it genuinely offended me on an artistic level. He had time to build a branded relocation proposal, but not time to ask me one direct question before announcing my departure date to my grandmother. I flipped through 3 pages before I gave up. Cost of living comparisons. Apartment listings in neighborhoods near his potential office. A section labeled Civil Engineering Opportunities with links to job boards in France. A note about how my license might potentially transfer after additional exams. English-speaking expat groups. Transit maps. Photos of cafes. A bullet list of shared quality-of-life upgrades. The final slide was a photo of us from a vacation 2 summers earlier, both smiling into the sun, with the words, "Our adventure starts now." I stared at that picture longer than I should have, because that version of us had been real. That was the dangerous part, not the manipulation. The fact that sometimes it had been mixed in with real love, real laughter, real tenderness. That was what made this feel less like escaping a villain and more like grieving a person who had quietly mistaken control for vision. I closed the PDF. Then I texted him. "I appreciate the effort, but my answer hasn't changed. This is your opportunity, not ours. I support you pursuing it solo." He replied less than a minute later. "You're going to regret this for the rest of your life." I looked at the message, then set my phone face down on the table and went back to recalculating runoff volume for a retention basin that had been submitted wrong twice by the same developer. It wasn't glamorous. It was also suddenly a relief. Numbers do not manipulate. Water goes where gravity sends it. You can trust that. Thursday was when his best friend got involved. Her name was Vanessa, and she had disliked me since the day Daniel introduced us. She wasn't rude in a way you could point to. She was worse. She was polished. The kind of woman who could ask what county engineering actually involves with a smile so bright it took you 5 seconds to realize you'd been insulted. At 11:22 a.m., she texted me a paragraph so condescending it should have arrived on embossed stationery. It included the phrases "small-town mentality," "holding him back," and "he's destined for bigger things than you can offer." I read it twice. Not because it was complicated, because it was fascinating. There is something almost impressive about the confidence of people who confuse wanting different things with one person being superior. I typed back, "He's free to go pursue those bigger things." That is literally what I've been saying. 3 dots disappeared. Then came her reply, "You don't deserve him." I stared at that, then typed, "I agree. He deserves someone who wants to move to Paris. I am not that person." That ended it. Because what do you do with someone who shows up ready for a fight and finds a locked door instead? Friday came. Interview day. And that was when one of the ugliest little details slid into place. He had booked the flight weeks ago. Weeks. Meaning while he was helping my mother choose a wine to bring for Easter, while he was texting me about what color shirt he should wear, while he was smiling across restaurant tables and asking how my week had been, he already had a plane ticket in his inbox. This was not an impulsive act of excitement. This was a campaign. Layered, scheduled, timed. And for some reason, that hurt more than the announcement itself, because the announcement had been shocking. This was deliberate. At 6:07 p.m., he texted me from the airport. Last chance. Come with me. No explanation. No apology. No, can we talk? Just one final push, as if my issue had been timing and not the complete erasure of my consent. I did not respond. He flew out. He had the interview. And 2 days later, on Sunday night, he called me buzzing with excitement. I could hear it in his breathing before he even spoke. He got it. 2-year contract. Relocation assistance. 58,000 euros a year. This is really happening, he said, voice bright and almost shaking. Lauren, please, I need you with me. There are moments where you can hear exactly like how two truths can exist at once. I was happy for him, and I was not going. Both were real. Congratulations, I said, and I meant it. I'm genuinely happy for you. He waited. I could feel the rest of the sentence pressing between us like a storm front. But I'm not coming. The line went so quiet, I thought for half a second the call had dropped. Then he said, so this is it? Yes. You realize I'm going anyway, with or without you. I know. And you're okay with that? I leaned back against my couch and closed my eyes. Outside, someone in the parking lot below my condo was unloading groceries. I could hear a shopping cart rattling over uneven pavement. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and stopped. Normal sounds. Grounded sounds. Mine. You should go, I said. This is what you've always wanted. Don't pretend to be supportive when you're abandoning me. That one sat between us for a second. Heavy. Familiar somehow, because it was the final version of the same trick. Redefine my refusal to surrender as cruelty. Turn his choice into my failure. I opened my eyes and looked at the crack in the ceiling above my couch that I kept meaning to patch. I'm not abandoning you, I said quietly. I'm standing still. You're the one leaving. That's semantics. No, I said, that's geography. He inhaled sharply, and then he hung up. After the call, I sat there for a long time. Long enough for the room to go dark around me. Long enough for my phone screen to fade to black in my hand. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the hot, immediate way. I was sad, because underneath the public ambush, the ultimatum, the pitch deck, the friends, the pressure, there was still the man I had loved for 2.5 years. The man who used to bring me coffee when I was working late on permit reviews. The man who once drove across town in a thunderstorm because I had casually mentioned I was craving dumplings. The man who could make me laugh so hard I had to leave the room to breathe. He was real. That was what made this hard. Not that he had become someone else overnight, but that the person I loved had always been standing too close to the person who believed my life was movable if packaged beautifully enough. And now he was about to move to another continent, and I was not going with him. And both of those things were the right choice, which did not stop either of them from hurting. By the end of that week, I understood something I had been resisting since Easter. This was no longer an argument. It was a separation with logistics still pending. Love was still in the room, but partnership had already left. And once that happens, all that's left is whether you tell the truth about it. I finally did, and it cost exactly what I thought it would, maybe more. After Daniel accepted the offer, everything accelerated. Not emotionally, logistically. There's a difference. Emotion lingers, loops, replays. Logistics just move. Dates, deadlines, forms, lists. His start date was August 1st, which meant he had about 10 weeks to dismantle an entire life and reassemble it somewhere else. Sublet his apartment. Sell or store furniture. Apply for a visa. Figure out what to take, what to leave, what version of himself he thought would fit into a Paris apartment with windows that barely opened and closets that didn't exist. And somehow, I ended up helping. It wasn't planned. It wasn't discussed. It just happened. He texted me 3 days after that last call. Do you have a drill? I need to take apart the bed frame and mine's dead. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, yeah, I can bring it over. That was how it started. Not with closure. Not with a conversation. With a power tool. His apartment looked different when I walked in. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone had already started erasing him from it. There were boxes stacked in the corner, half filled, labeled in messy black marker. Kitchen books, miscellaneous. His string lights were still up, but unplugged. The room felt paused. Like it was waiting for him to catch up to a decision he had already made. Hey, he said when he opened the door. Hey. And that was it. No hug. No tension-filled silence. Just two people standing in a space that used to belong to them, pretending they understood what it was now. We spent 2 hours taking apart his IKEA bed. If you've never disassembled IKEA furniture with someone you used to love, I don't recommend it. There's something deeply surreal about arguing over an Allen wrench while actively dismantling a place where you once slept side by side. At one point, he handed me a screw and our fingers brushed. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. A small electric reminder that we weren't strangers. Not yet. Thanks for helping, he said at one point, not looking at me. Yeah, I replied. It's just a bed. But it wasn't. It was the first thing in a long list of things we were quietly taking apart. For the next 2 weeks, we existed in something I can only describe as a liminal space. Not together. Not fully separated. Functioning like a team, without being one. I drove him to the consulate one afternoon because his Uber canceled twice. We stopped for coffee afterward out of habit, sat across from each other like we always had. Except now every silence meant something. Every word had weight. Every glance felt like it was asking a question neither of us wanted to answer. We didn't talk about us. Not directly. We talked about shipping timelines, about suitcase sizes, about whether it was worth bringing winter coats or buying new ones there. Practical things. Safe things. Because once you open the other conversation, the real one, you don't get to close it again. He gave me back the spare key to my condo on a Wednesday. Just placed it on my kitchen counter like it was something fragile. I figured you'd want this, he said. I nodded. Yeah. I didn't pick it up right away. I just left it there between us. A small metallic confirmation that something permanent had shifted. And then he tried one more time. It was a Saturday evening. He showed up at my place with takeout from the Thai restaurant we used to order from every Friday. Pad Ki Mao, extra basil, no bell peppers, because I always picked them out. He remembered. Of course he did. That was part of what made this so hard. He remembered everything that mattered, except the one thing that mattered most. Thought we could eat, he said, holding up the bag like it was an offering. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Okay. We sat on my couch, ate out of the same containers, watched an episode of a show we used to follow together, and for about an hour, it felt normal, dangerously normal, like the last 2.5 years hadn't fractured. Like if we just didn't say anything about Paris, about Easter, about decisions and ultimatums, everything might quietly reset itself. And then he said it, softly, carefully. What if I told them I needed 6 more months? I didn't respond right away. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. We could figure something out, he continued. A real plan. Together this time. Together. The word hung there. Fragile. Almost convincing. I looked at him. Really looked. And for a moment, I saw the man I fell in love with. Not the one standing at my mother's table making announcements. Not the one sending pitch decks. Just him, sitting on my couch, asking me to try. For about 30 seconds. I considered it. Not because 6 months would change anything. It wouldn't. I wasn't going to wake up one day suddenly wanting to leave everything I had built behind. But because he looked like us again. And losing that felt heavier than staying. But here's the thing about clarity. Once you have it, you can't unknow it. You can only ignore it. And ignoring it comes with a cost. You should go on time, I said quietly. His expression shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. Lauren, delaying will hurt you, I continued. Professionally. And 6 months isn't going to change my answer. He sat back. Silent. Processing. Or maybe just accepting. He nodded once. Slowly. Finished his food. Packed up the containers. Routine movements. Controlled. At the door, he paused. Like he had something else to say. Something important. Something that might change everything. But instead, he stepped forward and hugged me. It was the first time we had touched in 3 weeks. And it hit harder than I expected. Because it felt familiar. Too familiar. Like muscle memory. Like something my body recognized before my mind could intervene. I wish you were braver, he said into my shoulder. I closed my eyes. And answered just as quietly, I wish you had asked me first. He pulled back. Looked at me for a second. Then nodded. And left. That was the last time we were alone together. After that, things got louder. Not between us. Around us. His mother called me the following Tuesday. First time ever. She had always been polite at holidays. Warm, even. But we had never spoken one-on-one. Until that call. I understand you're letting my son go to France alone, she said. No greeting. No preamble. Just accusation dressed as concern. I'm not letting him do anything, I replied. He made a decision. I made mine. He made that decision for both of you, she said. Because he's a planner. He's always been decisive in relationships. You were supposed to support that. I leaned back in my chair. There's a difference between decisiveness and control. He's going to be alone in a foreign country because you're too stubborn to compromise. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictable. The compromise was having a conversation before applying for jobs in another country, I said. That option was available months ago. He chose not to take it. There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. You're small, Lauren. He outgrew you. I let that sit. Then I said evenly, I hope he finds everything he's looking for. And I ended the call. 2 days later, his father emailed me. A formal email. To my personal address. Subject line, disappointed. I wish I were making that up. He wrote that he believed in our generation. Men followed women to the ends of the earth. That my inability to adapt was a character flaw. That I was choosing comfort over ambition. That I was letting fear dictate my future. I read it once, closed it, and didn't respond. Because there is no version of that conversation that ends in understanding. Some people believe sacrifice is love. Others believe respect is. Those two definitions rarely coexist peacefully. By the time his departure week arrived, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief. Not even sadness. Something quieter. Like acceptance had settled into my bones. Heavy, but stable. And that scared me a little, because it meant this was real. Not temporary. Not fixable. Just over. The morning of his flight felt ordinary, which somehow made it worse. There was no storm. No dramatic goodbye scene playing out under rain and music. Just a gray sky, low and quiet, like the day hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. I drove. He sat in the passenger seat. 3 large suitcases packed into the back. 1 carry-on. A backpack crammed with adapters, documents, a French phrase book he had barely used but insisted on bringing. He checked his passport 4 times in the first 20 minutes. Not because he thought it would disappear, because he was nervous. And Daniel didn't do well with nervous. We didn't talk much. There were words, technically. Small ones. Did you confirm the luggage weight? Yeah. You printed the visa documents? Yeah. Practical. Safe. Like we had trained ourselves to stay in that space where nothing could break further because everything was already broken. At one point, he changed the music. Soft French cafe songs filled the car. A little too on the nose. A little too intentional. But I didn't say anything. Halfway there, a song came on. One we used to play on long drives. He used to sing it off key, dramatically, like he was performing for an audience of 1. Me. I kept my eyes on the road, gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, and didn't turn it off. Because some things deserve to finish playing, even when they hurt. We pulled up to the departures curb. Cars lined up, people unloading bags, quick hugs, quick goodbyes, the constant motion of people leaving and people staying. I parked, got out, opened the trunk, helped him lift the suitcases down, one by one, heavy, more than just clothes. We stood there for a second, side by side, not touching, not quite looking at each other, just existing in the space where something was about to end. He put his sunglasses on. There was no sun, which meant he didn't want me to see his eyes. I respected that. I really thought you'd come, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't accusing. Just honest. Like he was finally saying something without trying to shape the outcome. I know, I said. And I meant that too. Because I did know. He hadn't been pretending. He had genuinely believed I would follow. That I would bend. That love would be enough to override everything else. Not even to try it for 6 months, he asked. There it was again. The last version of the same question. Just softened. I looked at him then. Really looked. At the man I had built routines with. Shared holidays with. Imagined a future with. And I said the only truth I had left. You deserve to be asked, I said. I paused. I deserve to be asked. His jaw tightened slightly. Because he knew. That was where it broke. Not here. Not at the airport. Back at that dinner table. He stepped forward. Wrapped his arms around me. And this time, I didn't hesitate. I hugged him back. Tight. The kind of hug that has weight to it. History. Finality. For a second, I let myself feel all of it. Every good memory. Every version of us that had worked. Every small, quiet moment that made this harder than it needed to be. Then he pulled back, picked up his bags, and walked toward the sliding doors. He didn't look back. I stood there, counting the seconds without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 15. Then I got back in my car, closed the door, and drove. I made it about 10 minutes before it hit. Somewhere on the highway, that same song came on again, the one he used to sing. And this time, I didn't hold it in. I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. 10 minutes of it, maybe less. Enough to let something out. Enough to mark the moment. Then I turned the radio off, wiped my face, and kept driving. It's been 3 weeks. He's in Paris now. He posted a photo on Instagram a few days ago. A small apartment, white walls, tall windows with shutters, a street below with a bakery on the corner. He looked happy. Genuinely. Not the curated kind of happy. The real kind. I double-tapped the photo, because I'm not petty. And because I meant it when I said I wanted him to have this. Just not with me. My life hasn't changed much. I go to work. I review drainage plans. I argue with developers who don't understand water flow. I coach Little League on Saturdays. Last Sunday, I had dinner at my mom's house. She made pot roast. Didn't mention Daniel once, which is her way of saying, I see you. I respect your choice. I won't make this harder. My sister asked if I was okay. I said, yeah. She nodded, passed me the bread, and that was that. That's how my family works. No speeches. Just bread. I'd be lying if I said I don't think about him. I do. More than I expected. Not the Paris part. I still don't want that life. That hasn't changed. But him. The way he smelled like vanilla and coffee in the mornings. The way he reorganized my spice rack without asking and then acted offended when I couldn't find anything. The way he'd fall asleep during movies and still insist he had seen the ending. I miss the person. I don't miss the pattern. Because that's what this really was. Not Paris. Not a job. Not even one bad decision. A pattern. He chose things. Decided things. Presented them as finished. And I went along with it. Most of the time. Because they were small things. Restaurants. Weekend plans. Vacation spots. Things that didn't feel worth arguing over. Until one day, it wasn't small anymore. It was a continent. And by then, the pattern was already set. I got a text from him last week. First one since he left. The croissants here are as good as people say. I think you would have liked it. I stared at it for a while, then typed back. I'm glad you're happy. You deserve this. He sent a heart. I didn't respond. I put my phone down. Opened up a drainage plan for a new subdivision that had been giving me trouble for 2 weeks. The pipe sizing was wrong. The flow rate calculations didn't make sense. I had to redo everything from scratch. It took the rest of the evening. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't Paris. But it was mine. And I chose it. And nobody stood up at a dinner table and announced it for me. That's the whole story. If there's anything worth taking from it, it's this. If someone ever stands up at your family dinner and announces a future you didn't agree to, finish your plate first. The food's good, and you're going to need the energy.